result of this, the controversial documentary caused an intense public scandal against Jackson, reigniting speculations over allegations that were made a decade before. With many in the public eye disgusted by Michael Jackson's casual admission to dangerously inappropriate behaviour with minors, leaving the children involved, and himself, vulnerable to lurid assumptions by the worldwide press. In just a few months, Gavin Avizo would make his own allegations against Michael Jackson, and in November 2003, the King of Pop was charged with partaking in lewd and salacious acts against a child under the age of 14. What followed was the infamous court case turned media circus, in which Gavin and his younger brother testified that Jackson showed them, gave them alcohol, in front of them, and then Gavin on several occasions. However, Jackson was cleared of all charges in the criminal trial, causing the Avizo family's legal action against the pop star to fall apart as a result. But what happened to the then 15-year-old boy after he was the centre of the biggest court case of the century? Did his time in the limelight cause Gavin to spiral out of control, or has the now 32-year-old man been able to rebuild his life in the shadows of the international scandal? Today, Gavin Avizo lives with his wife, schoolteacher Shelby, a quiet life, far from the speculation and media turmoil that surrounded him all those years ago. Not much of a social media user, glimpses of the life he leads can now only be viewed through the numerous clips and images his wife posts on her numerous platforms.
Tonight, 12-year-old Gavin reveals he spends nights at Neverland, sometimes in Jackson's bed, the star on the floor.
Next thing you know, Children Protective Services became involved and different lawyers began asking questions. Tom Snedden is back in the picture again, and the Avizo family suddenly have decided that Michael had molested Gavin.
Gavin came to Michael and said, "Michael, could we sleep in your room tonight?" And Michael looked at me and says, "I don't know, I think you better ask your mother." "Oh, we already asked our mother. She says, sure, no problem." I'm like, no, this is something's odd. This is not right. And then as I was about to go tell Gavin that he cannot sleep in Michael's room, Michael says, "Okay, I have a solution for this. You have to sleep in the room with me." The two children slept on the bed, and Michael and I slept on the floor.
I came to New York to attend NYU to study music business. Yeah, I was 16 years old. I turned 17 shortly thereafter, but when I arrived in August of 2001, I was 16 years old. Chaotic, to say the least. Of course, 9/11 happened just I believe my second week of classes, so that colors the memories of that time. But it was overwhelming in general. I mean, I was on my own. I went to go see Michael Jackson on September 10th, and I was starting classes. I was responsible for getting myself to classes every single day. It was definitely overwhelming. I came to New York University to study music business, and part of the reason that I was so interested in music business was because I'd been such a big fan of Michael Jackson. Not only of his music and his dance and all that, which was incredible, but also of his business acumen. So I came to NYU knowing so much about publishing and royalty rates and things like that because I had studied all of his business deals. Our first week of classes, we had this program meeting that we would do, which they were weekly assemblies where everybody in our major would get together and discuss things that were happening in the industry. We would have speakers come in from various record labels or NARAS, which works with the Grammys and different songwriters, things like that. And it was a time to come together and really assess the landscape of the music business. And the very first program meeting, I was introducing myself to the group as a whole. And I don't remember if I was running for some sort of like representative position or if I just wanted to introduce myself for whatever reason. But I was wearing a Jackson's Victory Tour t-shirt, and it was vintage. I just bought it in the Village. And a young man came up to me and told me that he liked my shirt, and that young man turned out to be Jordan Chandler. Several weeks later, after we'd already come back to classes after 9/11, I was working as a work study in the music department, so he came in to register for private guitar lessons. He always carried his guitar with him everywhere he went. And we had a nice conversation. He remembered me from our program meeting. We had a little chat, exchanged pleasantries, and he gave me his form. And as I went to register him for these private lessons, I saw his name for the first time, which was Jordan Chandler. And I believe he had told me his first name, but I didn't know his last name at that point. And when I saw Jordan Chandler on a piece of paper, I couldn't quite place it then either. It just sounded very, very familiar. And keep in mind, at the time, Jordan Chandler's name wasn't widely known because in the US, alleged crimes of sex abuse, particularly when they're minors, are very protected. But I went online and I asked Jeeves, dating myself, and I suddenly realized that he was in fact the first accuser from 1993. I mean, my mind exploded when I found out who he was, and I definitely told some people who were close to me. I didn't confront him though, because at that point in time, I knew that I believed Michael was innocent, but the fact of the matter is I didn't know 100%. And if there was even like one shred of doubt, I didn't want to risk re-traumatizing somebody who was potentially a victim. And remember, at that point in time, Jordan Chandler was the only accuser, and the media certainly wasn't focused on it. They were more focused on, Michael Jackson's new album release. And, it wasn't all flattering, but, it seemed like this was, water under the bridge and something that didn't need to be addressed. He was a nice guy. I mean, I'm going to be honest. He was very nice, always very polite. He would always carry a guitar around with him. He made his own music. He would describe it as pop R&B like Michael Jackson. I remember that because he said it many times very clearly. He would wear fedoras. Yeah, that was Jordan.
What were your determinations when you examined him?
He seemed to essentially be a healthy.
And we also weren't, and I've been very transparent, we weren't best friends. We weren't very close. I kept, him at arm's length because I knew who he was, and I didn't really know how to deal with that. And he was very close with, I remember one other person in the program who also was sort of like a pop R&B guy. I believe he did production, and he also was a big Michael Jackson fan. So I mean, when I think about the people in the program that I saw him with, the people that he did surround himself with were people who were Michael Jackson fans. I was told that at a party, Jordan, played all of Michael's music, danced like him, did all of his moves, and that his apartment was almost sort of a shrine to Michael, that there was a lot of different like fan memorabilia. It doesn't surprise me that people are scared to come out because, I have some flexibility. I work for myself. If I were in a corporate job, I might be scared too because we don't really know who the powers that be are behind Leaving Neverland. And, you know, to speak out at this point, it might cause a conflict of interest for somebody if they're working with a big corporation. You know, it could really harm their career. So I'm not surprised that people would be afraid to come out. You know, in just discussions, you know, we were college students, you know, we would have our discussions about our parents and venting and that sort of thing. He said that he felt very used by his parents and that he wasn't close to them. He never mentioned siblings either, so I don't know what was going on there, but he did say multiple times that he was not close to his family and that he felt that he was used by them.
I'm sure most of you are aware of the recent television special that claimed to give an honest, candid, and revealing look into the private life of one of the world's most successful and controversial celebrities, Michael Jackson. The revelations were explosive. The ratings were enormous. But what TV journalist Martin Bashir presented was a twisted and edited construction of scandal and innuendo, not a true representation of the interviews that actually took place.
When Living with Michael Jackson was released, it reignited the discussion about whether or not Michael Jackson was a child molester. The film featured a close-up of Michael holding hands with Gavin Arvizo, who was a cancer victim, who then went on to be the accuser in the 2005 trial. And because of that shot and, you know, the ratings behind Living with Michael Jackson, it was a huge topic of conversation in every area of my life, particularly in my program meetings. Immediately after the Martin Bashir documentary aired, we had a program meeting and there was a discussion about, you know, whether or not Michael Jackson was a child molester. People were calling him freaks. These were people who did not have any fondness for Michael Jackson. And I chimed in with my belief that I didn't believe that Michael Jackson was a child molester and that the documentary was you know, misleading and exploited him. During that conversation, Jordan Chandler chimed in and said that he too believed that Michael Jackson wasn't capable of the things he was being accused of. And he said that voluntarily, and he said it without my prompting, and he wasn't asked. He wasn't in the direct conversation, no. I mean, I was arguing with a group of maybe 3 other people, and he was seated close to us, but he wasn't in on this discussion. And, you know, throughout the semester, there were different occasions like that where he would, again, sort of reaffirm things that I said in defense of Michael Jackson. And I remember that very first time, I remember catching his eye. It was shocking that he would speak up, and it really affirmed my belief that Michael was innocent. And, you know, given things that Jordan had said separately, having nothing to do with Michael Jackson about his home life, you know, it affirmed my belief that he was a victim of his parents' greed and that he was forced to say certain things. Because I really have a hard time believing that if he had been molested by Michael Jackson, he would be going out of his way to say that he didn't think he was capable of these things. And I didn't address it with him. I mean, I was one, I was very young, and 2, I didn't really know how important it would have been to address it then. These conversations all happened before Gavin Arvizo made any allegations against Michael Jackson. So I no longer had classes with Jordan. And I believe I wrote him an email. I'm not 100% sure that I sent it, but if I did send it, I didn't get a response. I was approached initially, very shortly after the Neverland raid, by people who worked for the Jackson family, who knew of me because of message boards. And I was asked if I would give a statement, and I did. And I subsequently ended up on the witness list, yes. I mean, there were certain members of the Jackson entourage, I should say, who wanted me to do a little bit of a media tour, which I didn't feel comfortable doing. You know, during that time, I was approached by Stacey Brown, who is known by Jackson fans as somebody who used to be very supportive of Michael Jackson and was very good friends with Rebe Jackson, who then flipped and became an anti-Michael Jackson force in the tabloids. But during our conversations, when he would call me, he was very effusive in his praise of Michael, and he would urge me to sort of, I would say, plump up my Jordan Chandler story, which I never felt comfortable doing. I only would say, exactly what I knew for a fact. But he even encouraged me to say that I was Jordan's girlfriend, or that Jordan had a crush on me, or something like that. And that was absolutely not true. In retrospect, knowing how he turned on Michael, I feel like he did it as like a preemptive way to discredit me, because if I were to lie about that, it would discredit my entire story. But I, of course, was never willing to do that. And I take this very seriously. Like, I firmly believe in due process, and it certainly wouldn't have won me any favors industry-wide to testify in his trial, and that's something that perhaps I was a little naive about as a kid, but now as somebody who's worked in the industry, I understand how things work. I don't think I understood the enormity at that time. All I knew was that this was somebody whose life and livelihood was on the line, and I had information that could potentially help him, so I felt it was my obligation and my duty. His name wasn't widely known, and from my discussions in the program, I don't think that there was really anybody else other than very few people who knew who he was. So yeah, people could be sitting on information that they don't even know is relevant. No, this doesn't benefit my career at all. This doesn't give me access to anything. I'm very much somebody who likes to be in the background. That's why I do PR and publicity. Like, I want my clients to be in the spotlight, but I myself, I kind of would prefer to hide. But I'm speaking out because you asked me to, and because all of this nonsense is being rehashed and relitigated in the media, and it's ridiculous. I understand that people would be skeptical of my story because I am a fan, and I don't hide that I'm a fan. But the fact of the matter is, if I had even the slightest doubt that Michael Jackson was innocent, I wouldn't be speaking out. I heard directly from Jordan Chandler that he didn't believe that Michael Jackson was capable of the things he was being accused of. And that's very powerful. Every allegation, since, is built upon the original 1993 allegation. And I believe that if that one is false, which I do believe it is false, all the rest crumble.